So, what can the catalyst meditation do to stop our global chaos? Um, First of all, let's talk about a little bit about what won't stop it. Then let's talk about what will stop it. And then let me give you some behaviors of stopping, or I should say, transforming unwanted behavior. And I would like to say that I believe that this is the only thing that can change this kind of behavior. So, um, what won't stop our global chaos? You can't stop breaker consciousness with more breaker consciousness. Now, for those of you who have read any of my books, you know what I mean by breaker consciousness. If you haven't read any of my books, basically, it's the consciousness that's running our world right now, our human world right now. And it's the consciousness that is leading us to destruction. Um, you can't stop violence with more violence. And if you look at how deeply invested we are in violence, whenever there's any conflict going on, the only thing we have to offer to the conflict is more violence. And what we wind up doing is picking one side or the other and just giving them a whole bunch of weapons and then watch what happens. You can't stop mental dysfunction with more mental dysfunction. We have no answers for this. And so what we wind up doing is say, okay, just take these pills and get out of my office. And people come back in the office saying the pills aren't working anymore. Well, I got some more pills for you. Let's take these pills and don't forget to take those pills too. And we have a major problem in our society that we don't even talk about because we know we have no answer for it. You can't stop spiritual starvation with anything other than spirit. It doesn't work. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with causing, first of all, calling a spiritual crisis a mental crisis. It's not. And trying to fix the mental crisis with pills, and they don't work. So we've got all these different strategies that we use. And the bottom line is we have to do something different. But then when we start proposing this different thing, we either get pushback or we get, oh, that's really interesting, Sharif. I don't have time for that right now. I'll talk to you later. Bye. And that becomes how we handle our crises. Ignore them. Okay, so if that won't stop the crisis, the chaos, what will stop it? Well, I'll tell you that in about 10 minutes. But first of all, I want to say it's very interesting when you see how our society structures our information of what we can see. We have lots and lots of evidence that a collective viewpoint, what I'm calling holonic consciousness, and a nonviolent viewpoint and a visionary viewpoint outranks everything else you can do. It's what we should be doing. It's what I've been advocating that we do. And it's time for us to get that advocacy up to a new level. And I want to remind you that the people in my lineage, the people in my lineage of societal transformation, have been doing this for decades, have been working it for decades. It's been successful for decades, and we're still ignoring it. The people in my lineage, like, for example, Mahatma Gandhi. You remember he said to the British, we want you to leave as friends, but we definitely want you to leave. And the reply to that by Lord Mountbatten was, you can't seriously expect us to simply walk out of India, the richest province, the richest colony that the British have. That's impossible. He said, can't be done. And then there are these pictures of Lord Mountbatten lowering the British flag and raising the Indian flag over a free and independent India. It wasn't exactly as impossible as he thought it was. We have our own examples of this in this country. Martin Luther King, taking ordinary actions and elevating them to this consciousness changing moment. And by ordinary actions, I mean, walking down the street, riding a bus, going to the Woolworths counter and buying a hot dog and a Coke. All of that very ordinary behavior, opposed by the consciousness of the time, led to a transformation of consciousness. So buying a hot dog and a Coke led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act and led to Martin Luther King receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Years later, the people in Berlin were advocating for taking the wall down. And Erich Honecker, the head of East Germany at the time, famous for turning the guns on anybody who tried to cross that wall. He was asked, how long do you think the Berlin Wall will last? And he confidently said, the Berlin Wall will last another 100 years. And from the time he said that, the Berlin Wall didn't last another 100 hours. Now, that's how rapid this kind of change can be. I was in Berlin a couple of weeks after the wall came down. And I wanted to go specifically because I wanted to see what a revolution actually looked like. And I'm very proud to say that there's still a whole lot of wall standing. And so I had my chance to chip at the wall, and somewhere down in my storage bin, I've got a little vial full of my strikes for freedom. And, but it was when people started crossing the wall, Erich Honecker ordered his troops to open fire on them, and they refused. The consciousness shift never hit him. He doesn't have to be the one that you address. And I say this as all the people who continue to focus their energy on Donald Trump. Trump isn't the problem. No, I'm sorry. Trump isn't the locus of the problem. The problem, well, I'll tell you what the problem is in about 5 minutes. Okay. We also have Václav Havel and the folks of Obchansky Forum defeating the second largest superpower in the world at the time, the Soviet Union, without firing a single shot. And they did that not because they aimed opposing energy, but because they aimed consciousness energy. Same thing with Nelson Mandela, and I've got this great picture, if I can call it up real quick, of uh, when when you keep someone in prison for 27 years, over a quarter of a century, and he gets out of prison smiling, what does that say to his consciousness and how he could infect someone else with that consciousness, smiling even when he was inside the prison? I may not have said this, I don't think I said it to this group. And if I did, you're going to hear it again. This is a story that I heard. I went over to South Africa and gave a speech and a workshop at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And while I was there, I heard this story about he when he was president, he liked going to a particular fast food restaurant. Fast food in South Africa is actually pretty good. Um, and he had himself and his security detail, and they were there, and they'd been there before, and they got their food, and they're sitting. And uh, it's a mixed race fast food place. And the white guy that walked into the restaurant, and Mandela said to his security guards, asked this guy to come over and sit at our table. And the guy came over, and Mandela didn't say anything to him. And he sat down, and he was eating his food, and they ate together. And when he was finished, the guy got up and left. And the security detail said, what was that all about? And he said, when I was in the prison, I was regularly beaten and tortured. And they had beaten him all day long at one point. And he begged one of the guards that he just asked for some water. He needed to drink some water. And the guard unzipped and urinated on him. And that guy that he invited over to share his meal with was the guard. Now, I would have thought of a whole lot of other things to do with this guy. And I had the security detail to enforce that. But instead, he acted, and I'd like to say he acted like a human being, but I think he acted as more than a human being. This was above and beyond the call of duty. And I think all of us have to be at that level, to be up and above the call of duty. And finally, on this list of examples of transforming unwanted behavior, I have Dr. A.T. Aryaratne of the Sarvodaya movement in Sri Lanka, that I was intimately connected with, and to helped to end their 30-plus-year-old war, helped to get a ceasefire going. So let's talk about what's going to stop that kind of behavior. Number one, it won't stop. You can't try to stop the behavior. If you try to stop it, you give energy to the behavior itself. You have to focus on transforming it. And focusing on transforming the behavior is tantamount. You have to really understand the behavior in order to stop it. This was something Dr. Aryaratne from of the Sarvodaya movement had created this huge radio. And by that, this is my analogy of his creating a huge organization. Hundreds of thousands of people on the island were influenced by Sarvodaya. And for 30 years, he tried to end the war between the group in the world known as the Tamil Tigers and the government. And for 30 years, he failed. It didn't, the war kept getting stronger. I got there in 95. I started looking at this situation in 96. And I proposed some changes to what Sarvodaya was doing with regard to its peace efforts. I called it tuning the radio. He built the radio. He powered the radio. I just turned the dial a little bit, and I told him, I said, if you implement these things, this war is going to end in 2 to 5 years. Well, I was wrong about that. It ended in 18 months. And when it ended, the ending was so powerful. The ending was so abrupt. Inside of Sarvodaya, we were like, did we do it? Was it that easy? We actually didn't announce anything and didn't do any celebrating for 2 weeks, saying, is this ceasefire going to hold? You know, and it was very powerful, very robust. It held for 9 years. And that methodology, the methodology of how to tune the radio, is something that I've been trying to teach in this country and in other countries for over a decade. It's amazing who doesn't want to hear it. They want their own solution. They don't want the solution that actually works. So, what's going to work? Using targeted, focused, holonic consciousness. You focus on consciousness. That's why Sarvodaya did these huge peace meditations, to get people's attention focused on that level of consciousness. And by huge, I meant 100,000 people, 200,000 people, 300,000 people, all dressed in white, all coming up to a particular spot. And things changed. The second thing that you do while you are doing this focused consciousness, what Dr. Aryaratne called shifting the psychosphere, is having targeted, focused, demonstrative activity. You need to demonstrate the vision that you're talking about. What Dr. King was saying was we should be able to walk down the street. So you got a group of people together and they walk down the street and they turn police dogs and fire hoses and guns and everything on them. And the next week, the same people walk down the street again. And by doing that, they changed the consciousness of the people that were in that area. You need a vision to focus on. For as many years, as Donald Trump has been on the scene, we have had this focus on stop Donald Trump. He gets stronger and stronger and stronger because he's the living example of the law of attraction. You keep talking about it, you get more of it. We have had a vision, and that vision is that we can create a world that works for all living beings. I wear it every day on as I go out, and people look at the button and they're like, "What's that about? I don't understand that." Or I like the idea, but how do you do that? Um, I get interesting conversations around it, but this allows me to focus my attention of what I'm doing out in the world. So uh, the other part of that is the demonstrative activity of how do you actually act in the world? How do you act in the world in such a way that, first of all, the consciousness of the world can see you? It doesn't matter whether or not um, President Trump sees your activity or anybody else's. Um, what matters is whether you see it and all of the beings of the world can see it. And whether all of us in the world who have been negatively impacted by breaker consciousness over the last centuries can change that picture by joining with each other. And by joining with each other, I don't mean just humans, I mean all beings. And if we can do that, and as we can do that, we will change. So, very quickly, the first thing you have to do is shifting consciousness. Being anti-establishment does not mean you've shifted your consciousness one bit. What that means is you want to take over from this person so you can act the same way. Having a vision means more than either supporting the status quo or supporting the opposition. Operating from joy, operating from the joy that's inside your heart, replaces fear and anger. Operating from excitement, being excited about what we're doing, is the cure for depression and despair. Operating from holonic consciousness, this isn't just my consciousness, this is the consciousness of all. Operating from holonic consciousness is the antidote to ego consciousness. Focusing on the power of all, especially all non-humans, all more than humans, is the antidote for power over. And vision implementation, acting as if you're free, is the opposite of protesting. Okay, that takes up all of my time.